Montana Territory, September 1882. The wind had teeth. Zadie Albright hunched her shoulders deeper into her worn coat, one hand gripping the reins of the mule wagon, the other tightening around the tiny hand of her 5-year-old daughter, Polly. The dirt road to Laurel Creek was rougher than she remembered, and the clouds above looked ready to split open any moment. Her son, Peter, age 7, sat beside her, his boots swinging beneath the bench, lips tight. He had not spoken since sunrise. Zadie didn't blame him. They had been left before more than once, first by their father, then by the man who had promised to fix what the last one broke. Promises had no weight anymore. "Are we gonna stay this time, Mama?" Polly asked, voice small. Zadie didn't answer. The wagon creaked to a stop in front of the run-down homestead she had inherited from her aunt. The place was half collapsed, but it was land, and no one could run her off it. She climbed down, lifted Polly and Peter to the ground, and looked at the house like it might bite her. "Get the blankets first," she said, soft but firm. "We'll sleep in the back room, it's got a roof." She turned toward the barn, or what was left of it, and that was when she first saw him. He was on horseback, riding along the fence line like he owned the horizon. Tall, broad-shouldered, hat low over his eyes, a rifle slung across his back. His horse was dappled gray, moving smooth as cream across the dirt. He pulled up when he saw her, dismounted in one quiet motion. "You Zadie Albright?" he asked. She nodded, wary. "Who's asking?" "Name's Yates Nolan. My ranch shares a border with this one." He gestured over his shoulder to the west. "Heard someone moved in. Figured I'd come see if you needed anything." Zadie crossed her arms. "We're fine." His eyes flicked to the children, then to the wagon, then back to her. "Is that so?" Peter narrowed his eyes at him. Polly peeked out from behind her mother's skirt. Yates took off his hat, running a hand through his wind-tossed hair. "Look, I ain't trying to be in your business, but that roof's barely holdin'. If you want, I can help patch it." Zadie shook her head. "We can manage." Yates studied her for a long moment, then with a single nod he turned and walked back to his horse. "Wait," Peter said suddenly, surprising even her. "It's gonna rain." Yates turned. "That it is." Peter looked at his mother. "Let him help, Mama." Zadie's mouth tightened. She hated owing any man a thing. But the clouds above didn't care about pride, and her children deserved better than a roof that leaked. She nodded once. Yates came back the next morning with hammer, nails, and 2 bundles of cedar shingles. He worked with his sleeves rolled up, sweat darkening the back of his shirt. Peter watched his every move, asking questions Yates always answered with patience. Polly brought him water in a tin cup and giggled whenever he thanked her. Zadie kept her distance. "You always this quiet?" he asked one afternoon while she was hauling water from the creek. "I do not have time for talk," she said, not looking at him. "Well, if you ever change your mind," Yates said, "I have got plenty of it." He did not push. He came each day, fixed what he could, then left before the sun dipped too low. Peter started calling him Mr. Yates, and Polly began weaving wildflowers into his horse's mane. On the 5th day, when the roof no longer leaked and the stove finally held heat, Zadie met him at the edge of the yard. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Yates leaned against the fence post. "Because someone should, and because I see the way you hold everything together when your hands are shaking." Zadie looked away. "I have been left before," she said, voice low. "More than once. And I am not looking for anyone to rescue me." "I am not here to rescue you," he said. "But if you ever decide you want someone to stay, I will." She stared at him, stunned. "I mean it," he said. "Let me be the one who stays." Zadie swallowed hard. She had not let herself believe in words for a long time, but there was something in his voice solid, steady like the earth beneath her boots. She did not answer then. She just nodded, barely. Later that night, as she tucked Polly in and kissed Peter's forehead, she stepped out onto the porch. The stars were clearer than they had been in weeks. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Yates was still out by the fence, feeding his horse an apple. He looked up when she stepped outside. "You hungry?" she called. He smiled, slow and easy. "I could eat." She opened the door wider. "There is stew." He tied off his horse and walked toward her, not fast, not eager, just sure, like he knew exactly where he belonged, and that was the first time she let him in. The morning after Yates stayed for stew, Zadie scrubbed her hands raw in the wash basin. The water was cold, the the kind that bit under the fingernails, but she didn't flinch. Through the open window, she could hear Polly singing to the hens in a made-up tune, and Peter was splitting kindling with steady, careful strikes. She should have felt settled. Instead, her stomach twisted with a feeling she hadn't carried in years, something half hope, half warning. Yates had finished his stew slowly the night before, watching her with quiet eyes while she mended a seam in Peter's trousers. He hadn't asked questions. He didn't fill the air with talk meant to impress. He just existed beside her, unhurried and solid as the table between them. That morning, he returned just after sunup with a sack of seed potatoes over one shoulder and a roll of fencing wire under the other. Zadie met him at the gate, wiping her hands dry on her apron. "You're not here to fix anything," she said. "No," Yates replied, setting down the sack. "Thought I'd help you plant." "I didn't ask for that. I know you didn't." They stood quiet for a moment, the wind lifting the hem of her skirt, tugging at the brim of his hat. Then she stepped aside. "You ever put in a crop before?" she asked once they reached the garden plot. "Enough to know blight likes low ground." "Then you'll know that corner's no good," she said, pointing with her chin. "We'll keep to the ridge." They worked side by side in the hard earth, and for once Zadie didn't feel the weight of every task. Yates dug rows while she dropped the seed pieces, covering them with her boot heel. The rhythm of it, the quiet cooperation, was easier than she expected. She didn't need to speak, and neither did he. When the sun reached its middle point, they paused by the well. She handed him a cup of water, and he drank without taking his eyes off the horizon. "I was married once," he said. Zadie didn't answer, just refilled the cup and waited. "She died birthing our second." "Never saw the child take breath." His voice didn't waver, but she heard the years packed into the space between words. Zadie nodded once. "Mine left before Polly was born, no note, just rode off, left the boy to carry the rest of it." Yates took his time replying. "A man like that's not worth the shadow he cast." "Still cast it just the same." He met her gaze then, steady and sure. "You don't have to carry it alone." She didn't look away, didn't flinch, but she didn't answer either. That evening, Peter brought in a sack of turnips from the root cellar, proud of his find. Zadie set Polly to washing them with a shallow basin on the porch while Peter helped her slice them for soup. Yates lingered near the edge of the yard, hands loose at his sides, waiting. She stepped out once the pot was on the stove. "You can stay for supper again," she said. "I didn't bring anything to trade." "Then bring your hands," she said. "The pump outside needs tightening." He nodded and went to work without another word. Later, after the children had eaten and curled up near the stove, Zadie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the last of the daylight fade. Yates joined her, his hat in his hands, the wind lifting the scent of sage from the field. "I thought you'd be gone after the roof held," she said. "I told you I'd stay if you let me." "I didn't say I'd let you. You didn't say I couldn't either." She turned toward him, the lines of her face softening just a little in the dusk. "You always this patient, only when it matters." She looked out toward the pasture where the grass bent and whispered in the cooling wind. "I don't know how to want someone without fearing they'll leave." "I won't ask you to," he said. "But I'll be here anyway." Zadie let the silence stretch between them, not heavy this time, but full. Then, without looking at him, she said, "You can come by tomorrow, the fence out back's leaning." "I'll bring my tools," and he did. By early October, the first frost laid a pale shimmer across the fields, and the mornings turned sharp enough to sting the lungs. Zadie rose before the children, slipping her arms into a shawl worn thin at the edges, and stepped outside to draw water. The bucket rope creaked against the pulley, and the cold bit into her knuckles, but she worked without flinching. Stillness suited her. She'd learned to make use of it. Behind her, the soft crunch of boots on dry grass pulled her from her thoughts. Yates stood a few yards off, holding a half-built wooden gate against his shoulder. "Didn't want to knock," he said, tilting his head toward the house. "Figured you'd be up." She nodded and poured water into the basin on the porch. "That gate'll hold, better than what was there," he said. "Your pigs keep slipping the wire." "I noticed." He shifted the weight of the gate and looked toward the barn. "You ever think about keeping a milk cow?" She wrung water from her hands, careful not to meet his eyes. I think about a lot of things I can't afford. I know a fellow west of the ridge, lost his wife last winter. He's got more stock than he can feed, said he'd trade a jersey for help with his fence line. Zadie wiped her hands on her skirt. Why are you asking me? Because I'd be the one doing the work, he said, and you'd be the one feeding the cow. She sighed through her nose and glanced toward the smoke curling from her chimney. I've never kept one on my own. I can show you how, Peter's voice called from inside, still thick with sleep. Zadie turned toward the door, hand on the frame. I'll think about it, she said. By midday, Yates had the new gate hung and swinging clean on its hinges. He stayed after to chop wood without needing to be asked. Zadie watched from the lean-to, sorting through a pile of old nails, keeping her eyes on the rhythm of his work. He didn't talk unless she started it, and that settled something in her. When Peter came around the corner holding a cracked horseshoe, he held it up toward Yates. Can you shape it back? Yates set down the axe. Not without a forge. Can you teach me to make one? I can teach you to find someone who already has one, he said, kneeling beside the boy. You don't need to do everything yourself. Peter looked toward his mother, unsure. Zadie gave him a small nod. Later that evening, while Polly brushed dust from a book she'd found in the loft, Zadie stood with Yates near the edge of the pasture, watching the sky burn down to rust and amber. You always wanted land, she asked. Not at first, he said. Used to punch cattle for wages, slept where I could find room, got tired of answering to men who didn't care if I bled or froze. What made you stop? My brother's widow had 2 sons. She needed help more than I needed open sky. Zadie turned toward him. You still help her. She married a schoolman from Billings last spring. Good fella, she don't need me now. Zadie looked back toward the house. It's strange, she said. Having someone around and not wondering when they'll leave. I've got no plans to, Yates said. She crossed her arms, the evening chill settling into her sleeves. Plans change, so they do, he said, but I don't. She watched him for a long moment, measuring. You're not a man who says more than he means, are you? I never learned how, he said. She stepped closer, slow. Her voice dropped low, like it might break if she raised it. If I let you stay, it won't be for a season. It won't be until the roof gives or the children stop asking for your name. If you stay, I want you to mean it. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving a smooth horse no longer than her palm and held it out. Peter said he wanted something to carry in his pocket, he said. I made 2. She took it, her fingers brushing his. The wood was warm, the edges careful. You're not going to scare me off, he said. You already would have. Zadie looked down at the carving, then up at him. Then I guess you'd better come in before supper goes cold. He followed her in. A week after the first frost, the morning settled into stillness so complete Zadie could hear the crunch of every chicken foot in the yard and the shift of the barn roof in the wind. The air smelled of dry hay and smoke from the stove, and the light came slow, stretching long across the walls. Inside, Polly had taken to drawing chalk shapes on the hearthstones, while Peter practiced tying knots Yates had taught him the day before. Zadie watched them from the table, needle moving steady through a patch on Yates's shirt. He'd left it without a word that morning, folded and clean, a tear near the shoulder. Not a request exactly, but not nothing either. When he returned that afternoon, he brought with him a leather-bound ledger, dirt smudged and weather softened, and set it gently on the table without sitting. I've been meaning to show you this, he said. Zadie marked her place in the stitching and closed the tin of buttons. What is it? Accounts, stock tallies, list of tools needing repair. I've kept records since I bought my claim. She opened it cautiously. The pages were lined in neat, slanted script with columns of grain sold, calves born, salt purchased, fence lengths measured in strides. You're giving me your books? She asked without looking up. I'm offering them, he said. If this life's going to be shared, I figure the numbers ought to be 2. Zadie turned a page. Not many men would. I'm not many men, he said. She ran her thumb along the edge of a page. You ever think about building something bigger? What do you mean, joining the parcels? Running a single herd, one brand. His hands settled on the back of a chair, quiet. Only if it's what you want. Zadie glanced toward the door where Polly's apron hung and Peter's boots leaned side by side. I've never had the say before, she said. It's a strange thing being asked. Yates's voice stayed low. I won't do anything you haven't agreed to. She closed the ledger and pushed it gently back toward him. Leave it here. I want time to see it through. That evening, after the children had gone to bed and the wind rose hard against the windows, Zadie stood at the sink drying the last tin plate. Yates sat nearby, one boot pulled off, the other still damp from crossing the creek. You ever think about your own children? She asked, not turning around. I used to think I wouldn't again, he said. Then I stopped thinking about it altogether. She set down the towel. Would it trouble you, raising one's not your own? He didn't hesitate. They'd be mine the moment you asked. Zadie leaned both hands against the basin's edge. Peter still wakes sometimes. He won't talk about it, but I know. I don't need him to talk, Yates said. I just need him to know I'll be there. She turned to face him. And if I don't always know how to let someone in, if I falter, I've seen you falter, he said, you still stand. She crossed the room slowly, bare feet silent against the floorboards. She knelt beside his chair, her hands finding his. I want this, she said quietly. Not because I need saving, but because you never tried to. He turned her hand over in his, thumb tracing the line of her palm. You said you'd been left before. I have. Then let me be the one who stays, he said. Zadie leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of everything they hadn't said before, and everything they no longer needed to. Outside, the wind calmed. Inside, the lamp flickered low, casting soft light across the worn lines of two lives finally meeting in the middle. And this time, no one left. By the third week of October, the ridge behind the homestead turned gold, and the creek ran slower, thick with fallen leaves. The fields lay quiet, last of the root vegetables pulled and stored, the soil resting under frost-hardened clods. Zadie stood by the window, arms folded, watching Peter and Polly walk the fence line with Yates. Polly carried a small tin pail, collecting feathers and smooth stones. Peter held a coil of baling twine with the same seriousness he carried in all things. Inside, the house had changed in quiet ways. Yates's coat hung beside hers now. His saddle bags rested beneath the bed frame, not packed, not waiting. She had moved the ledger to the shelf above the stove and placed her name beside his on its cover. It had taken her several days to do it, but when she did, she used ink, not pencil. She opened the back door as they returned, her voice carrying gently over the yard. You find the break, Peter nodded. Just past the sycamore, we'll need more posts. I'll go into town tomorrow, Yates said, brushing dust from his sleeves. Could use a few more tin sheets, too. Zadie stepped onto the porch. Take Peter with you. He's been asking about the smith. Peter's eyes lit, and he nodded before Yates could respond. I'll make sure he minds, Yates said. She glanced down at Polly, who was cradling two blue jay feathers like glass. And I'll keep this one busy. We've got fabric to sort for winter skirts. That night, after the children were asleep, Zadie unfolded a letter she hadn't read in months. It was written in her aunt's hand, the one who'd left her the land. The ink had faded, but the words stayed clear about the creek that never dried, the way the wind shifted in October, and how the place had a way of giving you back to yourself if you let it. She hadn't believed it then. She folded the letter again and set it back in the drawer. Yates entered quietly behind her, shutting the door against the cold. You kept her writing, he said. She held this land alone near 20 years, didn't say much when she was alive. But she said enough in that letter. You think she'd approve of me? Zadie turned, the lamplight soft across her face. She'd approve of anyone who carried their weight and didn't ask for more than they gave. He stepped closer, his voice low. I never meant to find a home here. I only came to check a fence. And I only meant to make it through the winter. They stood facing each other, silence stretching easy now. I want to marry you, Yates said, not because I think you need it. Because I want to build something that'll hold past us. Zadie's breath caught, not in fear this time, but something deeper recognition. I want that too, she said, but I won't wear a ring I didn't choose. Then we'll ride into Laurel Creek next week, he said. You can pick it yourself. She stepped into him, resting her hands flat against his chest. And when we're old and gray and this roof starts leaking again, I'll fix it, same as I did the first time. She kissed him, then not hurried, not unsure. It was the kind of kiss that came after every wall had been climbed, every silence sat through. It was the kind that spoke of years to come, not days behind. They married quietly 2 weeks later, under the cottonwoods by the creek. The preacher from Laurel Creek brought his wife to witness, and Polly scattered dried petals from her apron. Peter stood tall beside Yates, his shirt tucked and boots dusted clean. Zadie wore a dress she'd sewn from muslin dyed with walnut husks, sleeves fitted to her wrists, a ribbon at her throat. Afterward, they returned to the farm, where the stove was warm and the kitchen full with food brought by neighbors who hadn't come to call in months. Yates pulled extra chairs from the barn, and Zadie set tin cups on the table, her eyes soft with disbelief that so many had come. That night, after the last guest had gone, they sat on the porch steps, shoulders touching. The moon rose pale and full above the ridge, and a barred owl called from the woods beyond the field. "I never thought peace would look like this," Zadie said. Yates took her hand. "It ain't loud, but it's steady." Behind them, Peter and Polly slept in the loft, their breaths even, their arms tangled in quilts. Zadie leaned her head against Yates's shoulder. "I'm glad you stayed." His arm came around her, strong and sure. "I was always meant to." And so they built a life not from rescue, but from respect and quiet care. They planted spring crops and repaired the barn beams before the next snow. Peter learned to work iron, and Polly took to reading aloud in the evenings, her voice rising clear through the rafters. The land gave them enough, and they asked no more than it could bear. In time, they added a cradle to the bedroom and a second mare to the pasture. But nothing changed the heart of what they had: two people who met on hard ground and chose every day to stay, and they did, for all their years.